All right, so it's lesson 3 today. We're going to a bit of a shorter lesson today. So we're going to play around with .NET views a bit and have a look at some of the syntax, some of the new things that are kind of particular to .NET that we don't see. So let's fire up our beer store app. So if you want to open up Visual Studio, and we'll get our beer store running. I'll just close everything. So I'm going to go over to my debug menu, and I'm going to launch the site in IIS Express. One of the other things I want to do today as well is just show you, have you guys worked with GitHub integration through Visual Studio before? Or would that be something you haven't seen?
I have.
You have?
Personally, I haven't set mine up yet, and I don't think we did it in a class, but I know a lot of us have done it just because we've used Visual Studio before.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, I will go through the process then quickly. The simple way through using, I mean, there's a few different ways, but the easiest way is through Team Explorer. So I will go through posting. Okay, so I've used Visual Studio Code. Okay, so yeah, somewhat different. So I will go through that. So here's our app as we left it off last week. We created this store link in our layout, which linked to our store controller that we created. And we used a loop to kind of mock up some data and pass the data to our views. So last week, we created a category model, and then we generated a store controller. And in our index, we created a loop, some fake categories, data. We passed this list to our index view, and we made this store index view that looked kind of like this. So we declared a model at the top, which defines what type of data this view would be receiving from the controller. So this Enumerable Construct, this basically just means it's a collection that we can iterate through. So this page is going to get a collection of category objects, and then we could loop through that object and display any property. We could pass the data just using the view bag, but when we use view bag, it's just kind of an empty, unstructured container, so we don't have access to the properties and methods of these objects. By passing a strongly typed object, you know, we also get code hinting in our view, where if I reference my category from the model, I have access to the ID and name properties. So that's kind of where we left this off. Where we left off last week. So what we're going to do today, I mean, we've got a whole bunch of pre-built code, and some of it has some non-standard HTML in some of our views. So last week we looked at things like the ASP controller and ASP action. So these are server-side properties that we can use in our anchor tags, as well as we had the root for defining a method parameter within a link. So there's some other unfamiliar syntax, and we talked about the model last week, but there's some other unfamiliar syntax that kind of comes in our template. And I want to look at that today. So we're going to make one small change to our category model first. So if you go into your Solution Explorer and under Models, if you want to open up your category.cs file. So the model classes, they typically kind of mirror the tables in our database where we have properties that match the names of our fields in the database. Every property will have a data type. The model is also typically where we would set up data validation rules. So, for example, we would set up things like which fields are required, if we have maximum lengths on strings, if we have certain formats on a particular property, we would define all these things in our models. So one thing we want to do is take our name property for our category model, and we want to make sure that this field is required, meaning it wouldn't be possible to save a category to the database if the name property was null. So the easy way to do this, to define any kind of rules around any properties, I'm just going to create a couple spaces here, is in square brackets I can add an annotation. We'll do this, we'll do more of this, we'll do more advanced validation in a couple of weeks, but I just want to define my name field as being required. So if I put that required keyword in square brackets above my name, that should make this a required field. And Visual Studio is complaining. It's saying we can't use this required attribute. And the reason is we need to make a new reference in the class. So if I just click my little code hint here, it suggests we make a reference to system.componentModel.data annotations. So I'm just going to click on this option in my pop-up menu. It adds this reference on line 3. My red underline goes away, and now the required keyword turns kind of a light blue. So by adding this, the model is automatically going to prevent us from saving a new category if we don't have this required attribute. So I'm going to save that change. Now you could also add this line manually, but it's easier just to use the code hinting and let Visual Studio automatically generate that reference for us. Okay, so we've added lines 13 and line 3 to our category model.
Rich, Aves is just asking if your screen is freezing, what should he disconnect or reconnect, or just having some issues?
I would recommend that. Yes, if it's freezing for him, that's probably a good idea. Are other people, is the video freezing for other users as well, or is the video coming through okay?
Mine's doing pretty good.
Okay. All right. I did wire my connection. Okay. All right, I'll maybe pause for a sec. Okay. Will, was it bad before? You just had to leave and come back? Okay. All right, I'll just pause for a minute in case other people are leaving and re-entering. So make sure you add line 3 and line 13 to your category model. And then we're going to add a couple of new methods to the store controller. We're not going to write a lot of code in the controller. We basically just want to be able to create a form and inspect some of the syntax in the form. So once you've made the changes to your category model, if you want to open up your store controller, and we'll add a new method down at the bottom. So when we make a new method, all our methods will return an iActionResult object. And we'll call this method addCategory. We're not really going to save to the database. We just want to be able to load a form. Now, in the discussion board, there were some, it was really interesting for me to read your comments in the activity I gave you last week, asking you, what did you learn and what do you want to know more about? And somebody, I can't remember who it was, talked about this iActionResult. What is this iActionResult class? So this is kind of a generic wrapper that any controller method returns some kind of result. So most of the time, the iAction result we're returning is a view result. Usually we're loading a view into the browser. So the view result class, this is a subclass. It inherits from iAction result. So typically we're going to return a view as an action result, but we may return other things. Maybe our method returns JSON, especially if our controller method is an API. So we just want to return a JSON object back to the code that calls it. Another option that we have is to return an HTTP status code, like a 404 not found, would be another type of action result. So usually we're going to use views, but we may return other types of action results from our methods as well. So in here, we want to load a form to capture a new category object. Now I realize this would typically be the function of an administrator. Some anonymous user isn't going to be able to come to our website and add new categories to our website. We're not going to worry about that for today. We're really just primarily concerned with the syntax of the form. So we will just call return view. So we're just making a method called add category that will return a view. And then we'll want to put a link to this inside our store index. So I'll shrink this down. So our lines 34 down to 39 are new. And on this page, maybe above our list of categories, we just want a link here or a button that says add a new category. When the user clicks that, it's going to load a form. So we made our name property required, which required this dependency. And then we've added this method to our store controller. I'll just leave the code up for a minute before moving on. So once we've added this method, we're going to add a link, and then we're going to need to build the add category view. And then we can inspect some of the additional attributes that form is going to get. So I'm going to open up my views and store, and we'll open up the index view. So here underneath my heading, I'm going to create a new link where our controller is store and our action is going to be add category. And the text on the link can just say add a new category. So we'll put this above our list. So we'll have our heading, a link to add a new category, and then our loop will display the 10 mock categories underneath.
Rich, what line are you adding that on?
Line 5. Visual Studio always shows in green any changes. So you can see there's this green bar here. That's highlighting the new code. So now underneath my heading, we now have this new link that says add a new category. So line 5 in the view generates this code I've highlighted in blue. So what will happen if I click this new link now? If I click my add a new category link, what result do you expect we'll get? Yeah, that's right. Leo is right. It will generate an error. Why is it going to generate an error? That's right. So this is calling the new add category method. It's going to call this method here. However, add category is looking for this a view with the same name, and we haven't created it yet. So we're going to create this view, but we're going to create it in a slightly different way from the views that we've created so far. So far, we've just been creating empty views. And this time we're going to create a view with some pre-generated, pre-built code in it that saves us some time. So in my Solution Explorer, I'm going to come back down to my Views and Store, and I'm going to right-click the Store folder. I'm going to choose Add and View. And we get two options. We get a Razor View Empty, which is what we've been using, or we get this one, a Razor View with or without a strongly typed model. So we could build a form from scratch with an empty view, but why would we do that? Because Visual Studio is going to generate a category form for us. So I'm going to pick Razor View and click Add. My view name is going to be Add Category. And this is in Pascal case, so a capital A and a capital C and no spaces. Then we have some other options here. Under the template, the default template is empty, meaning there's no model for our view. We want to change that. So if I click this drop-down list beside template, it gives me page templates for creating, deleting, viewing a single, editing, or listing. So what we want to pick the create template. This is going to generate a blank form. Toby, do you get an error? Yeah, if you started the debugging, you can't add anything with the debugger active. Thanks, Mitch. This is why I generally recommend using start without debugging, because start debugging launches the site, but it locks the code, locks the project. You can't add to it. If you do start without debugging, then the server runs, but you can make changes. Thanks. And we all do it. So Toby, once you stop it, you'll have to do debug and start without debugging. Yep, sorry, who had a question?
No, it's okay. Avase was just wondering if you wouldn't mind going back. He's added a new file under the store and is wondering what the next option was that you gave.
Sure. So to add the view, you add a view and pick Razor View. The second option here, not Razor View Empty, the second one that says Razor View. I'm going to click Add, and that'll bring me to the next pop-up window. My view name is Add Category. And we're going to pick the Create template. This will give us an empty form. So once I pick the Create template, I can then go to my model class.
Sorry, he's saying he can't see Add View on his. It's not giving him the option of Add View.
He's on a Mac, so the options may look a little different. He may have to choose Add New Item. And then choose it would then be, I believe, Razor Page. he may have to do it that way on a Mac. The options are often not exactly the same. I don't think on a Mac he has quite all the, you'll have all the same template options as a Windows user will have. So I'm going to click Razor View. I'm going to add a category. My template is create. Which model do I want to pick here from the list of classes in the project?
Sorry, Rich.
Sorry, hang on, Liz. I just want to go through this screen once because I haven't finished it yet. So everybody's still just waiting for me to finish this screen. So can anybody suggest which model class I should pick? Yeah, that's right, Alex. So I'm going to pick the category model. I'll leave the data context for now. That will ask which database we're connecting to. We don't have a database. And if you have, some of you may have this option unchecked. We do, if use a layout page is unchecked, we want to check it. And then you may need to browse to views, shared, and layout. This will include our site header and footer and CSS and JavaScript along with this page. So these are all the options we want. Our view is called add category, our template is create, our model is category, and we are using our shared layout. So now I can click add. So we'll let this run for a second. And then we can see the file that Visual Studio generates for us. So we get a model declaration at the top that this form works with a category date model. It uses our shared layout, and it gives us a heading and a form with inputs for ID and name and a submit button. So we could create this form manually, but much easier to let Visual Studio generate the form. And then we can customize it. So now if I refresh my browser, in a way, so I will come back to you in just a second. I just wanted to finish that process. So here's what our auto-generated form looks like. Gives us headings, gives us a form. It knows that ID is numeric because in our model class, the ID is defined as an integer. And then we've got a name field. And in fact, if I go and submit something, if I try and click create, you'll notice that our validation, because we declared the name field as required, we don't even have to write the code to do this checking. Visual Studio's already done all of this for us. Okay, Waze, thank you. Thank you for your patience. Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, 1 second. So when it's saying I am adding a new item, I'm using ASP.NET under the web.
Yep.
So I'm not able to find the option for that in ASP.NET. Am I able to share my screen?
Hang on, I'll go through it again. Under Add New Item, you're looking for the option Razor Page. If you don't see that anywhere, there's a search box in this pop-up window at the top right. You can just search for the word Razor, and then it should come up with Razor Page.
He's just searching. saying, nope, I searched for Razor, but nothing's popping up.
Okay, we will have to look at it, but that may take a little bit of time. So right now may not be the time for us to do that.
Okay, that's fine.
So here is our add category page. And if you have a look at it, there's a bunch of additional ASP directives and non-standard HTML on here, things that we haven't seen before. So here's what we're going to do. On D2L, we don't actually need to make this page functional. I just wanted to scaffold the code. So Oasis, it's okay if you don't have this form working for right now. That isn't a problem, okay, for what we're going to do next. We're really just concerned with the HTML syntax of the page, more so than making it functional for right now. So on D2L, I did put everybody, break the class into groups. So I'm not sure where your group link is, but I guess we did use it actually in the first class when we had our whiteboard activity. So you should be able to find it under groups. And you should be able to see in here, everybody in the class should be in a learning activity group. I believe there are 5 groups, and everybody is in group 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Okay, if you're not sure which group you're in, you can let me know. Just put it in the chat, and I will check the groups and find you. So let me know if you have any problem with that. So here's what we're going to do. In D2L, in the week 3 folder, bear with me for a second because this item is supposed to be updated, but so I may just have to update the instructions here. I did, but D2L, I'm not sure, saved it. Okay, so click on this item. It says more on view syntax. So your instructions are here. And I will pause the recording after I give you the instructions. So there's a link here to a PowerPoint file that I've shared on OneDrive. So I'd like you to open this link, first of all. It's going to open up a PowerPoint file in your browser. Please don't download this file. We're going to be working in it collaboratively. So if anybody opens it up in their desktop PowerPoint, you're going to lock the file. So here, like I've got the option to open it in my desktop app. I don't want you to do that. So each group has got a slide. So if you're in group 1, I've given you a code snippet here, and I've told you which file in your beer store project contains this code. So if you're in group 2, you get some different code in a different file. If you're in group 3, here's your slide. Group 4, there's some code from the layout file. And group 5, this is from our new file. Sorry, this should say add category. So here's what I'd like you to do. You may have to, we don't have breakout rooms for this week. We should in the following weeks. So talk to the members in your group. Okay, no problem. I will tell you if you're not sure about your group, I will check. Just bear with me for 1 second. We'll find that out. So what I want you to do is communicate with the people in your group. You can use the WebEx chat. You can use email. I know a lot of you are on Discord. Communicate any way that you like, but together, what I want you to do. So don't just do it on your own. Talk to the people in your group. So add your name to the slide and come up with an explanation of any non-standard HTML. So these things like on this slide, it's got ASP validation for, ASP validation summary, ASP4. I want you to make an explanation of what do these things mean in your slide. Okay. Toby, I will find your group. Next week, for this type of activity, I'll be able to put you in a private meeting room so you can have a discussion. But I don't have that yet in WebEx. And for those of you watching the class video who are doing the lesson asynchronously, I will show you how to participate in this if you're not joining us in real time. Okay, Toby, I need to put you in a group. So I'm not sure I had you in the class roster when I made the groups. So Toby, I'm going to put you into group 1. If anybody else is not in a group, then please just let me know. Okay, so Toby, you are in group 1. So work it out together and populate the slides with an explanation of your code. Yeah.
Rich, I'm just letting you know, my name's Yolanda. I'm one of the interpreters.
Yeah, hi, Yolanda.
Hi, it looks like I was assigned to a group just so that group isn't waiting for me to join.
Got it. Okay. Understood. Thanks.
Okay.
So if you are watching this video later, we're probably going to have these first 5 code snippets covered. Yep, so I really want you to focus on the ASP tags, or the server-side code, because that's what's new. If you are learning asynchronously, I've added a whole bunch of extra slides. So if you're an asynchronous user, you're doing the lesson later on. This is part of your class learning activity, part of your 10% of your final mark. So if you're working on your own later, not Tuesday afternoon, take one of the blank slides, starting on slide 7. Find some other new code in an ASP view in our beer store. Take a screenshot or do a Windows snip and paste it in here, and then put in your name as well as an explanation of what the code is. So similar to what the groups are doing in class. So I'm going to pause the recording right now while we do this. I'm going to give you some more time to work on this and fill out your explanation. And then when we come back, maybe each group can kind of give a bit of an explanation, can share their explanation with the rest of the class. So I'm going to pause the recording here. So what is this view data title equals homepage that we would see on our index view? What does it do?
Hello?
Yep, we can hear you. Go right ahead.
Yeah, so we're essentially, like, view data is pretty self-explanatory. So we're editing the primary data of the view. So within the first pair of square brackets, we're specifying that we would like to edit the title, or set the title, I guess. And we are setting it to homepage. And then we have the kind of description of what view data is. So it's similar to ViewBag, where it transfers data from the controller to the view. but it's a dictionary type and can be accessible by string, whereas viewbag's a dynamic type, so it can take in multiple different types.
Right, you got it. So we can kind of use them interchangeably, but if we're passing simple data that is not a string, we're going to use viewbag. If it is a string, we typically use view data. And yep, good point about the @ symbol. Always good to indicate that. Okay, thanks, group 1. Maybe somebody from group 2. This code's a little bit, actually a fair bit more advanced. Can you kind of give us, somebody from group 2 want to give us a bit of an overview of what this means?
So it uses the Microsoft.ASP.NET Core identity, and which allows it to use the inject, the sign-in manager, and the user manager, which it and inject is it allows dependencies to be used.
Right. So dependency injection basically is providing one object to another at runtime. So one object can use another one at runtime. You got it. Thanks, Jillian. And Jillian, if you want to maybe add your name at the bottom as well.
It was there earlier.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll put you back in there. Okay. Thank you. Group 3. You got kind of a simpler one. Tell us what render body is, what it does.
Yeah, so it basically shares the same layout file with all views, and allows you to not have to repeat yourself in all the different views, and it shows where to render the body of the view for each individual view.
You got it. Right. So we're really only going to see this method in layout files. We're not going to see it in the individual views. And wherever render body is placed in the HTML, that's actually where the individual view content gets loaded. Thanks, Alex. And group? Okay, group 4, what's happening here? Somebody tell us a bit about this render section tag.
All right, I can do that. So the render section tag displays the content of the section that is listed in its argument. So in this case, it's scripts. In this case, we've listed that is required. So this section has to be, or not the section, the scripts have to be rendered by the render section.
Okay, so let's look at this. So
description, sorry about
that. So this is in the layout file. You're on the right track. We can maybe just flesh it out a little bit more. So here's our code that we see in our shared and layout. So we see this down at the bottom. So we've got links to our jQuery and Bootstrap and site. So what does this actually do? If we go and inspect our page source, let's see if there's any HTML here. So notice what this does. So these 3 links are hard-coded, but our render section, therefore, it includes these other jQuery files for doing validation. So we don't see these. So this has come from the render section. Because we have validation that might run, those scripts are rendered this way. Okay, and group 5, if you want to tell us about some of the things in our, so this was the form we created. Tell us about some of the new components in this HTML and what they do.
I guess I'll do that. Yeah, so the first div specifies what validation errors to display, which is dictated in the model. And then I guess I'll skip those other HTML tags since that's not new.
Yep.
And then finally, that last span tag there, the validation for, is specifying the response that's going to be sent back to the user upon providing invalid input for the name parameter.
You got it. That's right. So that's based on, so this is case sensitive, that ASP validation for name. This is matching our name property in the category model. So any data violation error is going to get rendered into this span tag using the class of text danger, which renders it in red. Okay, that's good. That's a good explanation. So wherever we have validation errors and we create our forms with those code generation tools, we don't really have to worry about writing the code to check the data and display it. Our form is automatically going to inspect the validation rules in the model, and it will appropriately add HTML elements in here with these ASP attributes that'll do our validation for us. Okay, so I'll leave the link here to these slides so that you have these notes to refer to. And again, if you are working asynchronously, I'd like you to take a new slide and poke around through the project and try to find something else. There are some other view components that are non-standard HTML that we didn't talk about in this exercise. So maybe you can find one of those, paste it into the slide deck, and enter your name and an explanation of what that code does. Excuse me. Okay. Anybody have any questions about any of the code that we've looked, any of the view syntax that we've looked at? Okay, it is 5 to 3. So what I would like to do is for us to take a brief 10-minute break. We'll come back at 3:05, and then we're going to go through database setup, and I will also quickly run through using Team Explorer to connect to and push to get through Visual Studio. So I would hope that we should be done. We should be done by 3:30. Now, Awais, I know that you're still probably having an issue creating that view. I'm going to step out of the room for a few minutes, but I'll try to come back before 3:05, and maybe you could share your screen and we can solve that problem. Okay, so I'm going to stop the first part of the recording, and we'll pick back up at 3:05.